Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar from People for Bikes. My name is Dr. Ash Lovell. I'm the Electric Bicycle Policy and Campaign Director for People for Bikes, and we are thrilled to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking about the potential for cargo e-bikes for urban delivery systems. We've got a great expert guest here to talk about this, and we're just going to kick it off. Next slide, please. All right, so our expert speaker today is Dr. Giacomo Dalla Chiara, whose name I hope I didn't butcher too badly. Giacomo and I have been working together for quite a while. He's a postdoctoral scholar at the Urban Freight Lab for the University of Washington, and he was the lead author on the white paper that we will be talking about today, about all things commercial electric cargo and the potential for its usage in the US. So I'll go over a brief agenda, and then I'll kick it over to Giacomo to further explain his findings in the paper. So People for Bikes, for those of you who don't know, is the bicycle industry's trade association. We represent over 300 different members, all working in the bicycle industry in the US. I am the Electric Bicycle Policy and Campaign Director for People for Bikes, and I took this job because I was so excited about the potential for electric bicycles to transform both our transportation systems and our urban centers and the way that we move around, but also for recreation. Today, we're going to be focusing mostly on transportation. I will say you can see the front cover of our white paper that we'll be talking about in more depth here shortly. This is all about how we can transform our urban centers, how we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions, how we can decongest both the deep urban centers and also areas outside of it, and what that would take for the US to emulate what we're seeing in Europe and other places across the country. So I am particularly excited about the potential for commercial electric cargo because it can help us scale. We know as the bicycle industry that there is a lot of interest in family cargo bikes and other types of e-bikes that are used for different types of carrying cargo, whether it's, we wouldn't call children cargo, but sometimes I call my children cargo, whether it's wiggly children or groceries or anything else, on an individual level, getting people out of cars and onto bikes is a great transition. But what if we could do that at scale with commercial applications of commercial electric cargo bicycles and tricycles? So the reason we were really interested in helping to support this great research that Urban Freight Lab led was because we wanted to see just how much needs to change in order to make this something that's really viable in the US. So from that, I will just hand it over to Dr. Giacomo Dalla Chiara and say thank you so much for being here. We will have multiple minutes at the end for us to talk about any questions that you may have, so please feel free to submit those. The presentation will be recorded and sent to you, so if you missed anything or if you'd like to share this with anyone, please feel free. And with that, I will hand it over to Giacomo.
Thank you, Ash. Let me share my slides. Okay, can everyone see them? Cool, thank you. So again, thank you, Ash. Thank you everyone for joining today. My name is Giacomo Dalla Chiara. I am an investigative lead at the Urban Freight Lab. The Urban Freight Lab is a collaborative working group of private companies. We are around like 15 members of academic researchers like myself and public agencies like the Seattle Department of Transportation, working together to address urban freight research questions. Together with my co-author Rishi Verma, Kelly Rule, and Ike Kuchel, we really want to thank People for Bikes for their support on this work. And really for providing the motivation to write this paper, as well as this amazing group of companies that you see on the right-hand side. These companies and the organizations, they supported us financially as well as technically. And I'm not only grateful for their support, but also really proud to feature them in the paper. I think they're all really trying to really change the system towards a more sustainable urban logistics system. So let me start from these two pictures. We are used to conceive bikes as a mode to really carry only our own weight. And on the right hand side, instead, we conceive freight as being really big and heavy. In this paper, really tried to change this thinking to show that it's not true. In particular, cargo bikes represent an alternative mode of transporting goods and services in urban local areas. And I will not be the one that says, we can transport everything in cargo bikes. We acknowledge that, of course, they have limitations. It's very hard to transport heavy goods for very long distances using cargo bikes. So we acknowledge their limitation, while some of these limitations are artificial. We are facing infrastructure that historically is vehicle centered. We have an infrastructure rules that promote vehicles, and really therefore trying to understand what are the artificial limitations, trying to smooth them out. It's really the aim of this paper. And the target audience of this paper are jurisdictions. We think cities, MPOs, state jurisdictions, they really play a key role in understanding these limitations and smoothing them out to really promote adoption of cargo bikes. So this was and therefore here we have our white paper. We envision a future that is kind of featured in this front cover of the paper. There is multimodal where cargo bikes can coexist with EVs, with AVs, with heavy goods vehicles, and so on and so forth. The other motivation of this paper was really from Ash when she mentioned that usually scientific papers are kind of boring and not colorful enough. So we try to make this paper a bit more easy to read and more colorful and nice in general. So the paper has three goals. First of all, it's more an educational goal, really to try to define what is a cargo bike. The second one is to really feature some amazing use cases that we found in across the country, in North America, of how cargo bikes are used currently. So it's more really to inspire what can be done using cargo bikes. And third and lastly, it's really to provide recommendations, actionable strategies that jurisdictions can implement really to promote cargo bikes adoption. So let me start from the definition. So what is a cargo bike? So a cargo bike is an electric bicycle. There is primarily used to transport cargo, to deliver pickup goods or perform a service. So the first sentence here, it's really defining a cargo bike by its purpose. We, of course, as we define, mountain bikes or road bikes, because of their specific use, they are physically different from a traditional bicycle. And one of the main features is the existence of a built-in cargo compartment or a trailer that allows the bike to support more weight. And again, it's, a cargo bike is a bicycle, so it's fully or partially human powered. There are different topologies that we listed in the paper. We start from two-wheel cargo bikes. So those are conventionally bikes with built-in brakes, or the so-called long tail, long john cargo bike. These are pretty popular, for instance, with gig workers performing grocery deliveries or meal deliveries in urban areas. We have three-wheel cargo bikes. Those are pretty larger. The Dutch buckets is front-loaded with the two wheels in front, versus a cargo trike is usually a bit larger and can carry more weight with the two vehicles in the back and is back-loaded. Those are operated, for instance, for B2B deliveries in Portland through this company called Beeline. Another example, another types of cargo bike, the four-wheel cargo bike, what we call the pod e-bike, and as well cargo bike with trailers. The trailers has been used a lot in New York City, and I'll show you why soon in a couple of slides. And this is a company, Cornucopia Logistics. It's an Amazon DSP. They perform grocery deliveries in New York and Manhattan. So we provided, some of my research is I'm very interested in understanding the human aspects of logistic systems, and we usually start from what we call the logistic behaviors, and we have some performance metrics that are reported here that we obtained from data through several pilots that we ran in Seattle. And that helped us kind of understand a little bit the two different systems that we have if we have cargo bikes versus a delivery van. So the first performance metrics that were reported in the white paper was the percentage of time spent driving versus parking. So imagine you are delivery drivers, you work for like 5 hours, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, and then some of that time you are in the vehicle driving, some other times you are parked and walking to perform the delivery. What we notice on average from our pilots in Seattle, a delivery van spends around 80% of their time outside the vehicle walking. So there is a lot of walking involved in performing deliveries. Versus a cargo bike, also in the downtown Seattle, was around 60% of the time the driver was outside the vehicle performing deliveries versus 40% of the time was driving. We, of course, as you spend, less time outside is also because the cargo bikes spend less time parking. So the dwell time, the amount of time you are parked for, it's much shorter. And the reason why it's also shorter is because cargo bikes are smaller and more agile, and they're also able to park closer to the delivery destination. And as well as they usually make only one delivery per stop. So you see here the percentage of parking stops with only one delivery made versus 2 or more deliveries made. A parcel van, around 30% of the time they make one delivery versus 67% of the time they make more than one delivery. So they walk to multiple destinations versus a cargo bike. From our pilot, we noticed that most of the time was spent performing only one stop, one delivery, and go to the next one. And therefore, also the average walking distance, it's much shorter for cargo bikes. And the speed as well, this is average speed, and not counting like the speed on highways, mostly like around the areas where the delivery was performed. We noticed that the cargo bike was faster than a delivery van. So here we go to the recommendation part of the white paper. So we identified 4 categories of recommendations that we put forward. Infrastructure types of recommendations, policy and regulations, incentives, and cultural education. We try to be, I wouldn't say complete, we try to prioritize what we thought was interesting. And I'm gonna try to go through some of them that we feature in the paper, providing examples and use cases. So first of all, infrastructure. And I named this slide Holistic Infrastructure Planning. So if you think of a cargo bike or really any vehicle, we can divide their time, the lifetime into 3 different states. Of course, riding, a vehicle spends some time on some kind of roads, infrastructure where you're riding the vehicle. Parking, right? So that's when you en route parking when you stop to perform a delivery. And storage, so overnight parking, where the vehicle stay overnight until you pick it up in the morning again. And it's very important that all these types of infrastructure, they need each other. You cannot have, of course, parking without roads, but as well you cannot have overnight storage in micro hubs without without roads and so on and so forth. And here, and I'm gonna go through each of these very quickly. So we started with route choice. So we did this pilot in Seattle, where we had a cargo bike running for about a month, performing deliveries in downtown Seattle, and we placed a camera on top of the bike, so we were recording the whole day of the driver, and we reported here in this slide, in this graph, the percentage of time the driver was riding on different types of infrastructure, namely travel lane, sidewalk, bike lane, and other types like alleys. What we noticed that, so if you look at the blue columns, they sum up to 100%. So if you consider all road segments, the driver spend most of the time on the travel lane, more than 50% of the time riding on the travel lane, considerable time riding on the sidewalk, around 35%, bike lane and others as well. However, if we only count the segments with the bike lane definitely was preferred, more around like almost 50% of the time the driver was in bike lane, still similar amount on the sidewalk, and a little bit less on the travel lane. So what we conclude here is that cargo bikes riders prefer bike lanes wherever there are bike lanes. So bike lanes are very, very important, not only because they support safe operations of the bike in general, of bikes, but also because they avoid the bike to ride on a sidewalk. And then sidewalk riding is often necessary. If you think of the destination of a cargo bike is a door, is a garage, is somewhere, is a building that is directly connected to the sidewalk. And if you think when you ride a bike, usually where are located bike corrals are on the sidewalk. Therefore, it's pretty natural for cargo bike to be on the sidewalk at some point of the route. The question is, how can we avoid the cargo bike also to ride in the sidewalk, while also being able to park on the sidewalk? So here we provided some recommendations that relates to like cargo bike riding infrastructure. So of course, extending the bike lane network, providing protected bike lanes, so then they become the preferred route choice for cargo bikes. Of course, improving connectivity as well, but also really if the spaces, of course, they don't always need a bike lane, or they don't always there is space enough for protected bike lanes. Reducing the speed of cars, providing car-free zones, pedestrianizing areas, creating bicycle boulevards, so all possible options that would also promote adoption of cargo bikes. Therefore, slowing the vehicles and really start creating the idea that cargo bikes are, start becoming the preferred options in these areas. When we look at parking choice, similar this data from Seattle, we looked at the total amount of time that was parked by infrastructure. Again, as mentioned, we had a considerable lot of time, 80% of the time, the cargo bike was parking on the sidewalk. And again, if you think again, that's where the destination is, that's where cargo bike corrals are. And that's where, we do have, a lot of cities that commercial vehicle load zones. So they provide a space for vehicles to park on the curb. But of course, there is no clear rules and legislations regarding like whether cargo bikes can also use the curb. So our recommendations there really was to think, from a cargo bike driver perspective, like what are the possible options to reduce the amount of time you park on a sidewalk and you ride on a sidewalk. So allowing cargo bike, curb parking, creating more mountable curbs or curb cuts, so then the bike can easily go from the bike lane or travel lane to the sidewalk to reach the corrals, and creating cargo bike corrals as well. And this is a picture from New York City where they started deploying kind of ad hoc, according to requests of different companies, these cargo bike corrals. So creating curb spaces where the cargo bikes can park. And lastly, micro hubs. Let me skip the definition. So there are different types of micro hubs for overnight storage. Cargo bike corrals is sort of like an example cargo bike. This is in New York City again. So what you see here is some part of the curb that is reserved for cargo bikes, and you see all this cargo bike waiting. This is not really en route parking. This is actually they're waiting to be loaded. And on the left side, actually, it's not easy to see, but that is a warehouse. And at the right hand side, when you see the parking lot, that's where the cargo bikes are parked overnight. This is actually the picture you see in the middle is the so-called the neighborhood logistics hubs. This was a pilot that was run by the Urban Freight Lab in collaboration with some of the Urban Freight Lab members. Here we had the cargo bike operating, and the cargo bike lived in this box, in this container that it was temporarily placed there for the summer, I believe in 2021 or 22. And this is basically what we had here. There was a delivery van going to this off-street parking lot. The delivery van was loading the delivery boxes that had to be delivered in the container, and the cargo bike was already in the container. In the morning, the driver would go there, would find the box and the cargo bike, load the box and the cargo bike, and start their route. This is a mobile hub. Basically, UPS will load different boxes, all the boxes of the cargo bike in this trailer, and they will carry the trailer with a van to a central location and then perform deliveries from there using cargo bikes. And this is the last one, is the Beeline Consolidation Centers. It's not in downtown Portland, but is right outside, and they can easily be reached with cargo bikes. Destination downtown can be easily reached with cargo bikes. Let's now move to policy and regulations, and I displayed here kind of like a history of the cargo bike regulation in New York City, which are probably the most advanced in the country. And there are a lot of features that I find really interesting in this history of regulations. When they started, for instance, in 2019, launching the cargo bike pilot, and I like that they're really heavy focus on safety. So they reduce, speed limit of cargo bikes. They require registrations of the pilot participants, but as well they provide incentives to participate in the pilot. They provide curb space through cargo bike corrals, as well. They can use free use of commercial vehicle load zones. The other aspects here is e-bike laws are the base of cargo e-bike. To create a cargo e-bike and regulatory environment, which is very important. Here, they use the model legislation that was suggested by PeopleForBikes. With the three class of e-bikes, that's the first step to start to create this regulatory environment. But as well, a lot of jurisdictions are introducing a fourth class related to cargo bike. Defining cargo bike, in the legislation directly is very important, especially if you want to, for instance, provide incentives. So when you want to provide incentives to cargo bikes, so you provide rebates, for instance, for people that want to purchase cargo bikes, you need to know what models are you define as cargo bikes, with what models are not cargo bikes or something else. So a fourth class would help in creating all these strategies and initiatives to support cargo bike adoption. The interesting aspects here is that some of the legislation here introduce also limitation in the structure, the way, for instance, the width of the cargo bike. Those are not always recommended, I would say. Here, initially, there was a 36 inches maximum width that was included. And that's why in New York City, you see a lot of trailers versus tricycles that are a bit wider. And then also in 2023, there was a proposal to change to allow for quad bikes and for larger bikes, but at the same time, they would introduce length restrictions, which also, again, would make those trailers not legal. So I have a few minutes left, so let me go quickly through incentive programs. So I'm showing here a few examples. We have one table that was supposed to be featured here. So, one way you can incentivize adoption is to increase demand for cargo bikes. Cargo bikes purchase rebates can therefore lower the entry barriers for individuals and companies to purchase cargo bikes. The example here is from Denver, Colorado. They have separate incentives and rebates for cargo bikes, which are separate, which are a bit higher than normal e-bikes, because cargo e-bikes are more expensive usually. Other programs in Europe, for instance, they incentivize, they increase the rebates, are more bikes are, cargo bikes are purchased. So it's more like target for fleets or companies that want to purchase fleets of cargo bikes. These are all examples of cargo bikes rebates. Boston Delivers is a program that directly subsidizes not the purchase of cargo bikes, but the use of cargo bikes. In this case, they launched this program last summer, where they incentivized Net Zero Logistics, a cargo bike-based company, to operate in Boston and basically subsidizing their services. So companies and restaurants and local businesses that want to use their services, they would have a discounted service for a certain amount of time. And lastly, cities can also use the public procurement to incentivize companies that are more sustainable, use EVs or cargo bikes. This is an example of the city of Portland that awarded the procurement of supplies through a partnership with Beeline and Office People. And last slide here is about culture and education. We do a lot of it in here in Seattle as much as we can. I want to feature on the left here an amazing organization called Pet and Relief Project. They are a group of volunteers organized by Cascade Bike Club. These volunteers they provide free deliveries for food banks for people that cannot access food banks by walking or driving. And what they did here was to they created this event to celebrate the 1.2 million pounds of food that was delivered by cargo bikes through these volunteers. And the mayor of Seattle also was at this event, and it was amazing, really, to show that these are cargo bikes, and this can provide a service to a community that is very important. This other picture and the videos here you see was an interesting experiment that we did at the Seattle neighborhood greenways. They thought of having asking the city, especially like the street designers, to come and experience cargo bikes. So we picked a selection of cargo bikes, and then we were doing like trials in front of them to show how they operate. And these are all cargo bikes that are already existing in Seattle. So it's really like education of the public officials and people that are responsible eventually to design those streets and bike lanes. And finally, this is about workforce, really creating an idea that cargo bikes is a reliable mode of transporting goods, and only for like transporting goods, but also to provide services. On top, the Seattle downtown ambassadors, they use cargo bikes to upkeep the downtown of Seattle. They go around, collecting garbage, cleaning graffiti. They used to be vehicle based. As well, like they had walking routes, and now they upgrade to cargo bikes. And underneath you see the UW mailing service, the University of Washington mailing service, that during COVID, some of their employees, they wanted to deliver using their own bikes because demand was down. And then from there on, they obtained a green grant from the university where they were able to purchase some of the cargo bikes, and now they retired 3 delivery events to deliver on the University of Washington campus, and they're using a lot of these cargo bikes from all the cargo bikes that you see here. So really, to conclude, a few takeaways. This is again from the perspective of a jurisdictions. All these examples that I showed to you are probably around 2 miles from where I'm sitting right now. All the UW, University of Washington mailing service, the Pet and Relief Project, the Seattle Downtown Ambassador. And I'm pretty sure if you're living in a city, there are a lot of things happening around you. And the first things I would suggest is really to go around, to walk outside and see who's using cargo bikes, what businesses and communities are already using those, and trying to understand what are the limitations there, what you can do to support them. The other is to really think holistically about infrastructure. So it's not about only riding and parking, but also micro hubs are very important. Warehouses right now, the way the warehouses structure, very far away in suburban rural areas, very far away from demand. But cargo bikes need to be close to the communities that they serve. Therefore, micro hubs are very, very important to support cargo bike adoptions. Finally, of course, safety is very important to create this comfortable idea that cargo bikes can be used and are to be used also large scale. So we do promote safety-focused regulations like the New York City regulations. And finally, again, this is more related to education and culture, cargo bikes adoption. You might be able to quickly adopt cargo bikes or promote cargo bikes through rebates, for instance, that are maybe like 1 year long, program. But then there must be a long term behind that. So there must be promotions, there must be activities and strategies to really change the culture to allow cargo bikes to exist in the long term and only in the short term. So again, thank you for listening. Sorry, I'm a few minutes late. The white paper is free for everyone. It's on, I believe it's on the website of PeopleForBikes. It's also on our website. And feel free to email me for any questions or any suggestions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Giacomo. That was wonderful. Thank you, everyone, for being here. If you have to drop off, we realize it is exactly 11:30 now. If you'd like to stick around, I'm going to ask Giacomo a couple of questions, and the recording will be available for everyone after this, as well as the white paper itself, if you'd like to dig in more. And you have both of our contact information if you'd like more information. I'm going to dive into questions. Does that sound good, Giacomo? Okay, so thank you for those of you who dropped in questions into the chat. And I'm going to pick just two since we're already a little bit behind schedule. I think, let's see, what urban planning strategies are needed to address the challenges posed by the growing use of e-cargo bikes and city logistics, considering impacts on safety and public spaces? Giacomo, you kind of already touched on this with your recommendations at the end, but is there anything else you'd like to add there?
No, I think so sounds like the question is really focused on safety. So again, safety rules are very important, and really understanding for us is really thinking from a driver perspective about choices. If I don't have a bike lane, protect the bike lane, and if the road it's like there's a lot of lanes, for me there's no other choice than riding on the sidewalk. So if we don't provide that infrastructure, or for instance, reducing the speed of vehicles, pedestrianizing certain areas, creating bicycle boulevards, even adding like a sign says, cargo bike and bikes can go on this road, please watch out. It's really creating this safe environment that is very important. Otherwise, the only option would be to ride on the sidewalk, which of course has other several issues, right?
Excellent, thank you. And my last question was submitted ahead of time. What can cities do to help make two-wheelers more accessible to last mile delivery people? You touched on this as well, but anything you want to elaborate there?
Yeah, I think, and again, to delivery people, it could be, gig workers as well, and not only companies. So, those are two different things, for individuals versus for companies. One thing that we usually do in terms as researchers is trying to understand what are the limitations right now. So, running surveys, asking people questions, understanding, is it because is where they live, it's too far away. So therefore, they don't want to wake up in the morning and drive like 20 miles to then reach where the deliveries are. So do we need, for instance, micro hubs or places where to store overnight closer to the delivery destination? Is it the price of cargo bikes? Is it that they just don't know that is an option? Is it the weather? So there's a lot of options there, and really like targeting different strategies and policies by understanding your community and the people that use or they can use cargo bikes. I think would be my first recommendation.
Excellent, thank you. And I asked that question because I had an answer myself. I will also note that New York City is obviously at the front lines of a lot of these conversations around delivery workers and e-cargo bikes. There's a group called the Equitable Commute Project that's out of Brooklyn that is working with the delivery workers to transfer them from bikes that aren't necessarily certified to the highest safety standards for batteries and others and into bikes that are. If you want to learn more about what's happening on the ground in New York, check out the Equitable Commute Project. And also feel free to reach out to me and Giacomo anytime if you have any questions about this. We are both, if you can't tell, very enthusiastic about this potential growth area, both for the bicycling industry and for municipalities who are looking to decongest their streets, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and improve air quality. Thank you so much for your time today. Thank you again, Giacomo. That was wonderful. Thanks for attending, everyone. And please reach out with any other questions.